You know, that incredibly frustrating experience where you've poured months, maybe even years into a project, and just when the finish line is finally in sight, you inexplicably just walk away.
Oh, yeah. That is a very universal feeling.
Right. Or maybe you're listening to this right now and you're being haunted by some dream you abandoned a decade ago, and you still can't quite explain why you just stopped. It's just sitting there in the back of your mind, refusing to let go.
It really is a universal haunting. It feels like this phantom limb of unfulfilled potential that just kind of aches whenever the weather changes.
That's a great way to put it.
Because we so desperately want to believe that pursuing a goal is a clean, straight line. You start a project, you put in the hard work, and you cross the finish line. But human behavior, and especially the biology driving it, is rarely that neat.
It is remarkably messy. And today, we are taking a deep dive into a massive stack of research to decode the actual anatomy of effort. We've got an academic paper on fight theory from Oxford Brookes University, a breakdown of Seth Godin's book, The Dip, and a really comprehensive annual review of psychology paper on the neurobiology of motivation and dopamine.
Plus an article from Gulf News on why people give up, a Wikipedia entry on some bizarre human memory quirks, and even a raw transcript from a hardcore motivational speech.
Yeah, quite the mix. So the mission for today's deep dive is to figure out why those unfinished tasks haunt you, why quitting can actually be your greatest strategic advantage, how to decode the resistance you feel, and, what is physically happening inside your brain's dopamine system when you're staring at your screen, totally overwhelmed, wanting to throw in the towel.
I think we should actually start right there with that haunting feeling of the unfinished project. Why do the things we walk away from stick with us so vividly, while the things we successfully complete just sort of fade from memory?
There is a brilliant psychological explanation for this, rooted in something called the Zeigarnik effect, which we pulled from the Wikipedia source.
Huh.
And the origin story of this discovery is just fascinating.
Oh, the cafe story. I love this one.
Right. So back in the 1920s, a psychologist named Bluma Zeigarnik and her professor, Kurt Lewin, were sitting in this really bustling cafe, and they started watching this one particular waiter who had what looked like a superhuman memory.
Right, he was taking these massive orders.
Exactly. He could remember these incredibly complex, huge orders for large tables perfectly without writing a single thing down, but they noticed something bizarre.
Which was?
The absolute second a table settled their bill and the transaction was finished, the waiter completely forgot the entire order. Like, if you asked him what that table just ate 2 minutes after they paid, his mind was totally blank.
It's so wild, and it perfectly illustrates how our brains are biologically hardwired to prioritize incomplete tasks. When you start something, your brain creates this internal, what they call task-specific tension.
Task-specific tension.
Yeah, it's a literal state of cognitive arousal. That tension acts like a spotlight, keeping all the details of the unfinished task highly accessible and active in your memory. Basically, it really wants you to finish. And once you do, that tension finally breaks and your brain just clears the cache to save energy.
There's also a related concept mentioned there called the Ovsiankina effect.
Right.
Which is that innate, nagging, almost physical urge you feel to resume a task that was unexpectedly interrupted.
Exactly. Your brain is actively lobbying you to get back to work.
But hold on, if we know that to be true, it creates a massive paradox.
How so?
Well, if our brains desperately want us to finish things, and they're actively creating psychological tension to force us to return to interrupted tasks, why do so many people give up right at the 1-yard line? We found this Gulf News article exploring exactly why people throw in the towel, and the examples were just heartbreakingly relatable.
They really are. Take the aspiring author they profiled. She spent years meticulously crafting this fantasy novel. She pushed through all the really hard parts, finally finished the manuscript, submitted it, and received some critical feedback from publishers.
She was right at the finish line.
Exactly. All she had to do was make the edits. But instead, she shelved the manuscript for 8 years.
8 years. Just sitting in a drawer.
Yeah. Or the other example they gave, a man who consistently filled out complex college applications every single year. He did all the prep work, paid the fees, but never actually walked into the room to sit for the final exams. He claimed it was just a, quote, mental block.
And reading those stories, it's so clear it wasn't because they just lost interest or got bored.
Not at all. People rarely quit right at the finish line because they stop caring. They quit because the weight of the impending reality becomes completely overwhelming.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a failure to set what we call SMART goals.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Right. Without that structure, people expect instant perfection and then they get crushed when the timeline stretches. But the much deeper issue, the real reason they stop, is the paralyzing fear of judgment.
The verdict.
Precisely.
Yeah.
As long as the novel is sitting in your desk drawer unfinished, or as long as you haven't taken the exam, you still have the potential to be a genius.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
To finish the book or take the test means you are finally subjecting yourself to the verdict of the world.
Yeah.
You have to face the reality of your actual ability rather than the safe fantasy of your potential.
Okay, let me push back here a little because this is where the conflict gets really loud in my head. We have a brain that literally creates mental tension to force us to finish a task.
The Zygarnik effect.
Right. But we also have a deep psychological fear of the final verdict that forces us to abandon it right when it matters most. So if I'm listening to this and I'm stuck in the middle of a grueling project, how on earth do I know which voice to listen to? Like, am I self-sabotaging out of fear, or is my brain trying to tell me this project is actually a waste of time?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's exactly where Seth Godin's framework completely flips the script. You know, society lives to feed us this incredibly toxic cliche, winners never quit and quitters never win. We hear it everywhere.
Constantly.
But Godin argues the exact opposite. He says winners quit all the time. In fact, they quit constantly. But they quit the right things at the right time.
I really love how he breaks this down. He maps out all human pursuits into 3 distinct curves. First, you have the cliff.
Right.
This is a scenario where things seem to get better and better and you feel great until a sudden catastrophic drop. The classic example from the source here is cigarette smoking. The longer you do it, the more hooked you get, the harder it is to quit, until eventually it kills you. It's a trap disguised as a reward.
Definitely.
Then you have the second curve, which is the cul-de-sac.
The literal translation of cul-de-sac
Yeah.
is dead end.
Yeah.
This is the job where you are putting in massive amounts of effort, you're showing up early, doing everything right, but there is zero upward mobility.
Right, nothing changes.
Exactly. It's just an endless flat plateau of stagnation.
And finally, you have the third curve, which is the most important one, the dip.
The dip is that long, agonizing, messy middle phase. It's this steep valley of stagnation that happens after the initial fun of starting something new wears off, but long before you reach the ultimate mastery of it.
It's where it stops being fun and starts being work.
Right. And the dip is brutal by design. It is what separates the amateurs from the experts. It acts as an intentional filter, creating scarcity in the world. And because surviving the dip is so rare and so painful, the people who actually make it to the other side become incredibly valuable.
Wait, I need to stop you there for a second because we also looked at that raw transcript from a pretty intense motivational speech.
Oh, the absolute motivation one.
Yeah. The speaker is literally screaming into the microphone, other than death, all failure is psychological, and telling the audience that you only lose when you quit. That hardcore burn the boats mentality feels completely 100% at odds with Seth Godin sitting there calmly telling us to quit things. How do we reconcile that?
It sounds contradictory on the surface, I know. But if we connect this to the mechanism of how effort actually works, they are completely aligned. They're just talking about different phases of the journey.
Okay, explain that.
That intense, screaming motivational speech.
Yeah.
That is the psychological armor you are required to wear to survive the dip. When that speaker says fear isn't a wall, it's a door, they are talking to the person who is deep in that brutal middle phase and wants to give up just because it's hard.
Oh, I see.
Godin's advice, on the other hand, is about resource allocation. He's saying you have to ruthlessly and strategically quit your cul-de-sacs.
Those dead-end jobs, the pointless argument.
Exactly. The side hustles that have no market. You quit those so that you have enough time, energy, and sanity left to survive the dips that actually matter. The golden rule here is that you must define your quitting strategy before you even start the pursuit, so you don't end up quitting in a momentary panic when things get tough.
So, Wasser, assuming you've done the math, you've mapped your terrain, you know for a fact you are not in a dead-end cul-de-sac. You are definitely in a dip that is worth surviving. How do you actually handle the daily grinding pain of it?
Because willpower is not infinite.
Right, we know that. Which brings us to a really fascinating framework from the Oxford Brooks paper called fight theory. And the origin story of this theory is just too good.
It really grounds the whole concept.
So the author of this paper, an executive coach named Justin Carlton, was on a Peloton treadmill, completely exhausted, running while listening to M&Ms till I collapse. And in that moment of physical exhaustion, he had this epiphany about his high-performing clients. He realized they weren't failing because they lacked ambition or vision. They had plenty of that. They were failing because their, quote, intensity was miscalibrated.
Traditional coaching, and just our general culture, usually treats resistance as a moral failing or a character flaw. It's treated as something you just have to blindly smash through with sheer grit or toxic positivity. But fight theory completely repositions resistance. It treats it as data.
Yes. If traditional coaching treats resistance like a giant brick wall you just have to repeatedly bash your head against until you bleed, fight theory treats resistance like a dashboard warning light in your car.
That's a perfect analogy.
If the check engine light comes on, you don't punch the dashboard and yell at the car to grind harder. You realize it's a diagnostic signal telling you exactly what is misaligned under the hood.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. And Carlton actually maps out 5 specific domains of resistance that trigger those warning lights. First, you have cognitive resistance.
What does that actually look like in practice?
Cognitive resistance is the overthinking. It's the mental looping, the self-doubt, the inability to focus, and what happens when you overthink. It triggers the second domain, emotional resistance. This is the acute fear, the anxiety, the feeling of total overwhelm.
And when you feel overwhelmed, your natural instinct is to hide.
Exactly. Which brings us to the third domain, behavioral resistance. This is procrastination. It's avoiding the work, suddenly needing to clean your entire house instead of writing that email.
Oh, I've been there.
We all have. Then you have motivational resistance, where the goal you are chasing suddenly loses all its meaning and you ask, why am I even doing this? And finally, threshold resistance, which is complete energetic overload. The tank is completely empty. You are burnt out.
The real danger, according to the research, isn't just experiencing one of these. It's when they combine into what the theory calls stacked resistance.
Yes, stacked resistance is when those domains cascade into each other. Your overthinking, which is cognitive, creates anxiety, which is emotional, which makes you procrastinate, behavioral, which makes you question your purpose, motivational.
The research illustrates this cascade perfectly with a case study about an entrepreneur named Evie. If you are listening to this and you feel stuck, Evie's story is going to resonate. She came to her coach dealing with massive stacked resistance.
Was completely overwhelmed.
Yeah, she had a high cognitive and emotional resistance. She was overthinking every decision, she was emotionally flooded, and she was aggressively beating herself up because she felt she was failing to be consistent in her business. She was staring at her dashboard, and every single warning light was flashing red. She felt she had absolutely nothing left to give.
And this is where the theory proves its worth. Instead of her coach telling her to wake up at 4 a.m., take an ice bath, and just grind harder, they used fight theory to decode what the resistance was actually signaling. They realized her emotional exhaustion was a flashing light telling her that her business goals were completely divorced from her actual self-concept.
So they completely shifted her target. Instead of focusing on some arbitrary business metric like hitting a certain revenue goal for the month, they set an identity-aligned goal. Her new goal was initiating a highly difficult, vulnerable family conversation about what work-life balance actually looked like for her.
And she also radically changed her relationship with failure. Instead of viewing her setbacks as moral failures indicating she wasn't good enough, she reframed them into pure data. She adopted this mantra, El Camino de Dios para mí.
God's path for me.
Right, it was a way of accepting the struggle as part of the process. By aligning the grueling fight with her actual identity, rather than an external metric, she suddenly unlocked the energy to push through the resistance.
Okay, but this raises a huge question for me. We keep talking about unlocking energy and finding the will to push through. We talk about changing our mindset and decoding resistance. But what is physically happening under the hood? Like, if I am sitting at my desk and I want to quit, what is the biological mechanism of that feeling?
To answer that, we have to dive into that massive annual review of psychology paper on the neurobiology of motivation. And the very first thing we need to do is completely shatter a misconception about a very famous chemical.
Dopamine.
Dopamine.
Yes, because pop culture, social media, even some doctors constantly refer to dopamine as the feel-good reward chemical. We're told it's the chemical of pleasure. You get a cupcake, you get a hit of dopamine, you feel happy. But the actual neuroscience says that is entirely false.
It is a profound misunderstanding of human biology. The science unequivocally proves that dopamine is not about pleasure at all. Dopamine is the activational motivation chemical.
Activational motivation.
Yes, it does not control your capacity to feel pleasure.
Right.
It controls your willingness to exert physical and mental effort to get to the pleasure.
Wait, I need to make sure I understand this. The researchers proved this using some really specific animal models, right? Can you walk me through exactly how they tested this?
Absolutely. The researchers ran rats through a few different tests, specifically the T-maze barrier task. In simple terms, they put a rat in a maze and give it a choice between two options. Option A is a highly preferred reward, delicious sugar pellets.
Sounds good.
But to get the sugar, the rat has to exert high effort. It has to climb over a physical barrier or repeatedly mash a heavy lever. Then you have option B, which is a low reward choice. Just standard, boring, tasteless lab chow. But it requires zero effort. It's just sitting right there on the floor.
And under normal circumstances, the rats will happily climb the barrier or work the lever because they really want the sugar.
Exactly. But then the scientists introduce a variable. They give the rats a drug called TBZ that completely depletes their dopamine levels.
And what happens?
When the dopamine is gone, the rats look at the barrier, they look at the lever, and they just give up. They refuse to do the work. They walk over and settle for the boring lab chow instead.
Oh, wait, are we sure the drug didn't just make them depressed? Like, did the lack of dopamine just make them not like sugar anymore?
That is the million-dollar question. And the answer is the most incredible part of the study. If you take those exact same dopamine-depleted rats who refuse to climb the barrier, and you just hand them the sugar pellets for free,
No effort required.
no effort required, they devour them, they love the sugar just as much as they did before. What scientists call their hedonic reactivity, which is their physical ability to like the reward and feel pleasure from it, is 100% intact.
Oh, wow. So if I translate this to human terms, it's like your brain is acting as an internal accountant.
Exactly.
You still want the sports car or the promotion or the finished novel. And if someone handed it to you for free, you would still feel immense pleasure receiving it. Your hedonic reactivity is fine, but your dopamine accountant looks at the grueling effort required, it looks at the barrier, then looks at your internal energetic bank account and just refuses to sign the check.
That is the perfect analogy. The scientific terms for this distinction are crucial. What you are experiencing when you want to quit is anergia. Yes, which is a lack of energy or willingness to work. You are not experiencing anhedonia, which is an inability to feel pleasure.
So bringing this back to the listener who is staring at a blank document for an hour, feeling like a complete failure, it's not that you are inherently lazy, and it's not that you don't want the goal anymore. Your brain is literally experiencing an energetic supply chain issue. Your dopamine system is actively calculating the effort cost, and without enough dopamine, it declares you bankrupt.
Yes, it is an internal economic calculation happening in real time.
Which completely changes how I view that hardcore motivational speaker yelling, "Your mind quits way before your body does." I used to think that was just empty hype. But he isn't just giving a pep talk. He is intuitively describing behavioral economics inside our dopamine pathways. He is literally talking about how our brain calculates the elasticity of demand.
He absolutely is. Your willingness to work is not a fixed personality trait. It is a fluctuating biological resource. And once you understand that dopamine regulates your willingness to pay the physical and mental cost of an action, you can stop judging yourself as lazy. You stop attacking your own character, and you start looking at how to recalibrate your intensity. Just like fight theory suggests, you check the dashboard.
Okay, let's pull all of these threads together because we have covered a massive amount of ground today. We started with the Zeigarnik effect, realizing that the ghosts of our uncompleted tasks haunt us because our brains are biologically hardwired to maintain cognitive tension around unfinished business.
Right.
We then looked at the paradox of why we quit right at the finish line, seeing how fear of the final verdict and the crushing weight of success can override that natural urge to finish.
We also mapped our obstacles using Seth Godin's framework, learning that the secret isn't to never quit, but to strategically quit the dead-end cul-de-sacs so we have enough resources to push through the meaningful dips.
And when we are in those dips, we learned from fight theory to stop treating our emotional and cognitive friction as a character flaw. We have to read that resistance as a diagnostic warning light, telling us we need to realign our actions with our true identity. And finally, we traveled all the way down to the cellular level of your dopamine system. We discovered that your willingness to work is a constantly calculating biological engine determining your elasticity of demand.
So the next time you hit a wall, do not just blindly push your head against it. Assess the terrain. Are you in a dip or a cul-de-sac? Check your internal dashboard to see what domain of resistance is flashing. And most importantly, ensure your goal actually aligns with who you are, so your brain's accountant is willing to foot the energetic bill.
That is incredibly empowering. It takes the shame right out of the struggle.
It really does.
Uh,
But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, slightly provocative thought to mull over. We've covered a lot of science today, and if we combine these concepts, a really fascinating possibility emerges.
okay, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Well, we know from the Zeigarnik effect that interrupted, unfinished tasks stay highly active in our minds, creating an ongoing cognitive tension. We also know, based on the neurobiology we just discussed, that the dopamine system is driven by the anticipation of the reward and the ongoing effort toward a goal, rather than just the final reward itself.
Right, the accountant is tracking the pursuit.
Exactly. Therefore, could intentionally walking away from a project right in the middle of a difficult, unfinished challenge, like stopping your writing mid-sentence or ending your workday when you know exactly what the next step is, rather than neatly tying up every single loose end before taking a break, could that actually be the ultimate biological hack?
Oh, wow. So instead of working until you are completely exhausted and the tension breaks, you manufacture the tension.
Precisely. Could leaving a task purposefully unfinished be the exact trigger your dopamine system needs to maintain the hunger? By refusing to close the loop today, you keep that mental tension alive, ensuring your brain has the chemical momentum it needs to fight through the dip tomorrow. It is something to think about the next time you are desperate to just finish a task and be done with it. Sometimes the best way to keep moving forward is to stop right in the middle.